All right, let's talk about something that's both fascinating and honestly a little scary. Why do these brilliant financial models, the ones built by some of the smartest people in the world, have a nasty habit of blowing up? And they always seem to fail at the worst possible moment.
So let's just dive right into that mystery. I mean, if these things are built with super complex math and they're designed specifically to predict risk, why do they break? What's the hidden flaw, the secret ingredient that leads to these massive, catastrophic failures?
Okay, first things first, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What even is a risk model? Well, think of it like a really sophisticated weather forecast, but for the financial markets. It looks at all the data from the past, stuff like volatility and how assets move together, and tries to predict the biggest possible storm so that, we can get our umbrellas ready. And that's the big appeal of these models, right? They give us this incredibly powerful, really comforting feeling that we're in control. It's like we've been handed a perfect, scientifically drawn map to navigate the total chaos of the market. But here's the problem, and our source material puts this so well. What happens when that perfect map is actually drawn on sand? The assumptions it's built on are just way more fragile than they look, and the tide is always coming in. So let's start digging into the first big crack in that foundation. And it shows up when you realize the very ground the model is built on is constantly shifting. Its core ingredients just aren't stable. And this slide, wow, this lays out the central conflict perfectly. See, the model has to assume a stable world, where things like volatility and correlations are predictable, they're constant, but market reality? It's a world that's always in flux. The experts call these parameters non-stationary, which is really just a fancy way of saying they refuse to sit still. So here's the crucial takeaway from that. When your model is built using data from the recent past, it's making a massive bet. It's betting that tomorrow is going to look exactly like yesterday. And that is an assumption that fails spectacularly at the exact moment the market switches from calm to chaos. It is literally like trying to drive a race car by only looking in the rearview mirror. But it gets even deeper. Sometimes it's not just the numbers that are changing. Sometimes the entire rulebook for the game gets thrown out the window. The market enters a totally new regime. And this quote, this just nails it. A model isn't necessarily wrong. It's just correct under certain conditions. It's only right within a very specific context, a particular set of market behaviors, what we're calling a regime. And here's what we mean by that. You can have a calm, low volatility period where it feels like it's easy to make money. Well, a model built and calibrated for that world is completely useless when a sudden panic hits, a high volatility deleveraging event, or even worse, a liquidity cascade. The rules of the game have changed, but the model is still playing by the old ones. And this leads us to what is maybe the most dangerous failure of all, how badly these models underestimate rare events. Because here's the thing about markets. Unlike the weather, in finance, disasters love company. The storms all show up at once. The data on this is just undeniable. Market returns have what we call fat tails. And that just means that the extreme events, the things way out in the ends of the probability curve that the model says are basically impossible, well, they happen way more often than the model predicts. So why does that happen? It's because market shocks aren't like independent coin flips. As the source says, losses cluster. One bad thing happens, and it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. No, it triggers another bad thing, which triggers another, creating this chain reaction, this cascade of losses all bunched together. So the really terrifying takeaway here is that any model that assumes these bad events are just random, isolated lightning strikes, well, that model is completely blind to the single biggest risk there is, the risk of a full-blown crisis. That 1 in 100-year storm can become an annual event. Okay, so that all sounds pretty bleak, right? If our models are so flawed, what are we supposed to do? Just throw them all out? No, not at all. The secret is to learn how to use these imperfect maps with a healthy dose of humility and a keen awareness of where they fall short. And that right there is such a powerful shift in perspective. The point isn't to build a perfect forecasting machine that's always right. The goal is just to survive. The math is absolutely necessary to understand risk, for sure, but it is not enough to actually manage it. So this gives us a simple, but honestly an incredibly useful framework. For any model you ever come across, whether it's in finance or anywhere else, you should do 3 things. 1, understand exactly what it's trying to do. 2, relentlessly question the assumptions it's built on. And 3, and this is the most important one, prepare for the moment that it will inevitably fail. Because when those models do break, when your map just doesn't match the world in front of you anymore, survival isn't about better math or a fancier algorithm. It comes down to sound, human judgment. It means cutting your risk, making sure you have access to cash, and thinking with pure, simple survival logic. And all of this leaves us with one final big idea to chew on. If we just accept that all our maps, all our models are flawed from the very beginning, then what's the real skill we need to build? Maybe true mastery isn't about trying to find a perfect map. Maybe it's about developing the wisdom and the judgment to navigate this chaotic world with a flawed one.